Let's get focused with InFocus, the series where we get you the most trending topics in Canada. Each episode, we are bringing you the inside scoop with experts, influencers, and leaders who are shaping the conversation. Ready to dive in? Let's go. Hi, my name is Ayaan, and today I'm with Nika Moeini. Nika, how are you doing?
I'm very excited to have you here and for this conversation.
I'm excited as well. So, tell me about yourself. If someone does not know you, how would you introduce yourself to them?
Okay, so my name is Nika Moeini. I am a visionary bridging planet, plant-based, and personal growth. So I host events that bridge sustainability, well-being, and connection. And I do various sales and marketing work around those three topics. My sole purpose in the world is to have a positive impact by creating connection at the intersection of sustainability, wellness, and consciousness.
So, I think that is a very interesting thing because you're doing so much. Where does this come from? I know you're from Iran, and I want to really go back to the roots first. And walk me through what was your actual childhood like in Iran? Was it like people here in the West imagine Iran to be a very different country? So if you have some myths to bust, it's your time.
Okay, sure. So I was born in Tehran, which is in the north of Iran. It is on the edges of a beautiful mountain, and the weather there is quite similar to Vancouver, actually. And it is a city of over 9 million people, so a very populous city. And most people don't really know that about Iran, of how many people actually live there. It's a very large country. And my parents are from the north of Iran, called Rasht. And ancestrally, I'm from that region. And that's a region that's really colorful and vibrant. It's also a region that has been more sheltered politically than other regions. And so it's really maintained its kind of indigeneity in a way and maintained its connection to the land. Since Rasht is on the shores of the Caspian Sea, it's very green and vibrant, and there's lots of rice farming and fishing, and it's really a region that is connected to the earth. And so my parents are both really having this deeper relationship with Mother Earth, especially my dad. And so growing up, I did a lot of hiking. I did a lot of connecting with nature in that way. And my dad and I, when we moved to Canada, we were part of the Scouts program. So we were doing like camping and different outdoors activities. So this means that I always grew up having this connection to the earth, which I noticed that some of my peers, for example, don't have. And so I feel that sustainability has been really baked into my essence as a person. And a lot of my friends, one of my friends calls me goddess of the earth. Like she thinks that I really embody like this connection back to nature. Another thing to note about my childhood and where I come from is that my parents were very politically active and very interested in the well-being of other people. And so they were always doing various activism, whether it was protests or other ways of just staying on top of what's going on. And when my parents were young, they were able to witness the revolution in Iran. And so therefore they grew up with this activist persona. And so then when they were raising me, right, I was always taught that everything I do should have a better impact on other people. And so with that context, I think it really shaped who I am. And then being an Iranian woman also really shapes me because I think about my privilege and being able to be in Canada, where I have the ability to be anything I desire. I can chase any dream that I have. I can get many different degrees and study so many subjects. I can create so many business ideas without the challenges and bureaucracy that they face in Iran, and also the oppression that they face in Iran for being women, where they're not able to have the same legal rights as men, and they're not able to speak up and use their voice. So I feel this really blessed persona that I have now, because I feel that I was yeah, able to have this life that so many people dream of back in Iran. So that's a little bit about Iran. Iran is full of really creative, vibrant people that unfortunately are not shown in the media for all of who they are, because the media is so preoccupied with all of the conflicts.
Yeah.
All the conflicts in the Middle East really takes away from how much we can be working with the Middle East and learning, and there's so much innovation that comes out of Iran.
What's something that people get wrong about when they get to know that you're Irani, or do they have any stereotypes or assumptions, and how do you tackle them?
Yeah, honestly, in Canada, I feel really well understood and well received. I meet a lot of people and I say I'm from Iran, and they say, oh, I have a friend from there, or my colleague is from there, and usually they're very polite conversations. I find sometimes if I go to the US, that's when it's a little bit more challenging, because in the US, they have even more of a narrative of being at war with the Middle East, whereas in Canada we don't have the same perception that we're fighting Iraq, right, or whatever. And they pronounce it like Iran or Iraq, and it's like, that's not right. Like, you know, like that's such an American way. So thankfully, actually in Canada, I feel really welcomed, and if anything, most people are quite curious and they want to learn. They want to learn what is the food, what is the culture, what are the issues that Iranian people are facing. And I'll just add one thing to this as well. Back in 2022, when more revolutionary energy started coming up again in Iran with the death of Mahsa Amini, I was involved back in Toronto at that time, organizing protests and organizing rallies with other Iranian groups like the U of T students who were doing rallies and things like this. And I found during that time that a lot of non-Iranians were very supportive. They would ask, how are you doing? How's your family? And they would also show up to the rallies themselves, or also some members of parliament were very supportive during that period of time in terms of supporting Iranians, and so that was really great to see.
What do they miss about Iran and Iranian culture? Tell us something that people don't know about.
Okay. You know, I actually think they miss just how relaxing it would be to be around their friends and family and the environment they grew up in. That's, I think, what they would miss the most. And going to their favorite restaurants, and in Iran and in the city that we lived in Tehran, when you go up close to the mountain, there's beautiful like restaurants and hikes and places where people just gather and they sit in community, and everyone is just so friendly and kind to each other. And I believe that that's what they miss the most, just that familiarity and ability to like almost relax and let their nervous system calm down, because when you're constantly speaking in your second language, I think it puts a strain on you, and you don't really feel just like that, like I'm at home, you know, like I'm peaceful kind of feeling. I think that's what probably they miss the most.
You mentioned that your parents miss the feeling of community, and you yourself are a community builder now.
Oh yeah.
So are you like trying to help them or help yourself find your own community here with your work?
Yeah, so you know, this is interesting. This is my first time reflecting on this in terms of my parents, because when we moved to Canada, my parents found a community called Toronto Iranians.
Okay.
And Toronto Iranians was a community that would go hiking together, lots of hiking, and when they would go hiking, they would sing the Persian songs, and it was really like wholesome. And I remember when I was little, I was like, Mom, like we're going hiking with all these old people again. Like as a kid, I didn't appreciate it, but I appreciate the nature, right? So my parents were like in the community, and then they would be like active. Like they wouldn't just be like, oh, I'm a member. Like they'd be like, oh, I'm a member, and like I'm gonna host a dinner and I'm gonna do this. And so like my parents, I think, always did that. So I guess subconsciously I learned, but they moved so many times. So my dad is someone, he works really hard. He loves working and he loves trying different jobs. So he changes jobs every couple years. So in Toronto, we moved a couple times. Then when I was 16, we moved to Langley. And this relates to the community aspect because when we moved from the east coast of Canada to the west coast of Canada, on the west coast in Langley in 2012, there was no Iranians. And so my parents created a Facebook group called like Langley Iranians. And then they found like the 5 other Iranians there. And so they were like building community, right? And that was awesome. So they always build community around themselves. And so then I guess I learned that I should also do that too. And I build my community, but here's the thing. I don't fit into my parents' community. That's a really important distinction. Like, I feel very different than my parents in a lot of ways, which relates to my coaching, which I'll get into later. Because obviously they grew up with their own desires and goals and dreams, and I grew up with my own, right? So we have differences. And my community is more around the spirituality and the consciousness and like personal development and these kinds of things that my parents aren't really interested in. So I also have built my own community. Also the veganism, right? That was like very different than
we are going to discuss that. I have questions.
Than my parents. So I also built community. So when I was in Toronto, my story is that, moved to Canada, lived in Toronto, then I lived in Langley and UBC, then I lived in Ottawa, then I lived in Toronto, and then I came back. So as a result of this, I've lived in several different places, and in each place I've tried to build community. So when I was back in Toronto, I created Toronto Vegan Girls Club. I hosted these events called Business Brunch, and Business Brunch was for women entrepreneurs to come together and talk and have brunch together. And I was always doing these community building events, and it wasn't until this year, kind of last year and this year, that I was like, you know what, this is just like who I am. Like, I'm a community builder. Before, it was always on the side, and it was like, okay, I have my job and then I also build community. And now it's like, no, my whole job is building community. And now I work at this co-working space, and my whole job is to build the community. So it's like, it's kind of funny how all of that ties together. You did a good job of getting me to like trace it all back.
Connect the dots. Yes, yeah. That's what I do. I should get a raise.
You should get a raise.
Thank you. So now, vegan food and Persian food, 2 very different things. How do you explain quinoa to aunties? Quinoa. Yeah, honestly, no one understands quinoa. Like, quinoa is a misunderstood grain, which is fair because you guys know where quinoa comes from? South America. Okay.
So quinoa is actually none of our cultures. Quinoa comes from its own culture, South America, right? However, veganism is growing in Iran, actually. If you go on Instagram, you can find Iranian vegans. You can even find vegan activism material in Farsi language. And there's actually a community called Middle East Vegan Society that does translation of vegan material, educating on what are the tenets of veganism. Because veganism at its core is not harming other living creatures. So it's not harming them for food, not harming them for fashion, not harming them for any purposes, and basically believing that they should have the autonomy over their own bodies. A cow should be able to decide what happens to its life. It shouldn't be forced upon him to be turned into meat or leather or whatever. So that's like what veganism is about. It's about compassion and kindness to animals. So there's communities now translating this information into these languages. That being said, I'd like to point out that in Iran, in the indigenous Iranian tradition, which the religion was Zoroastrianism, which is a religion that's really tied to connection with the elements and connection with the fire element specifically. And back in those days, before Islam came to the peninsula of Iran, Middle East, right? And there was these indigenous groups. The indigenous Iranians, like, they were quite plant forward. They were actually, a lot of the stews, a lot of the different herbs and like lentils and things that Iranians eat is plant-based. And then with the introduction of the Arabs to the region, that's when the kebab came, and that's when these different things came. Yeah, so actually before they came, Iranians were quite a plant-eating people from my understanding and from ancient poetry that was written in Iran at the time, you can actually find these references. So it's not like Iran has always been this like, we just eat kebab all day, that's all we eat, you know. That was actually introduced to the region, and due to like the different climate change impacts going on and some of the land not being able to be used, they're able to use it for grazing cows. But before, they were able to grow other things as well. So yeah, that being said, a lot of Persian food, if you look it up, there's stews. For example, ghormeh sabzi, which is a stew of herbs like mint, parsley, coriander with kidney beans, and also with beef. But then for me, you swap off the beef for tofu. Then there's qeymeh, which is a tomato and yellow split pea stew. Really delicious. All of these dishes have like, you know, some saffron and other things that really add the herbs to it. But for qeymeh, for example, again, you use like chunks of beef, but then you can replace that with either ground tofu or chunks of tofu. So there's a lot of modifications, and I went vegan 8 years ago. So my mom has had 8 years of practice in making all the recipes vegan for me, right? Not that I've lived with her this whole time of 8 years, but every time I visited her, she would actually make a vegan version. And even this morning, before I came here, she was making the Persian makaroni, which is like a pasta dish, but usually with ground beef. And so now she makes ground beef for my dad and then vegan beef for me.
That sounds tasty.
It's actually really easier than people think, and in terms of explaining it to the aunties, yeah. So when I meet other Persians and I tell them I'm vegan, they are a little bit surprised, but they actually also respect it. They are like, okay, I respect that you care so much about animals to like give up eating meat, but I don't really see it like a sacrifice. I see it like, wow, like this is alignment of my values. If I am saying I am a kind, compassionate person, then my choices of what I eat should also reflect my values, and also my value of sustainability and all of those things. So
do you think people who are not vegan are not kind?
No, I don't think that. I think that they haven't maybe reflected on what is really going on in the food system. And I don't blame them, because, you know, we're so busy and most people don't really think what has happened to this chicken before it became my food, or what has happened to this fish or this cow. They're like, oh yeah, I'm just hungry and I'm tired, I'm just gonna buy this like burger, right? And so I don't blame anybody. I believe that all of us need a deeper connection to our food. I actually took a class on conscious cooking, and conscious cooking is about how do we put intentions into our food, and how do we pause before every meal to give gratitude to the chef, the land, the rain, the sun, everything that came so that this food could be made for us. And we would all benefit, whether we were vegan or not, of reflecting, where does this food come from, and what is my intention with putting this into my body. And when you take those moments before every meal and you just like put the good intentions onto the food and put the gratitude onto the food, when you eat, you'll actually digest better and you'll actually feel a lot more calm. And I believe that we need to all slow down when we're eating. We need to stop distracting ourselves, watching a show, checking our texts when we're eating, just rushing. And modern society, capitalism, has put this pressure that you always need to be working even when you're eating. But it's like, can you take 5